so good to be here in Vegas. I came to this event saying I was coming to inspire people, but you've inspired me, and I feel great being here. You know, I was saying last night that the gentleman who gave the Rolex last night, I want to join his team. That's the thing. I've come to talk about something that means so much to me. Africa and the possibility of ending extreme poverty in Africa. It's a continent that is often misunderstood. There are so many people across the continent, close to 1 billion people, over 50 countries. And for most people thinking about Africa, what they usually think about is only the stories of the poverty and the war. In fact, there are several countries across the continent and several capitals who have been widely successful in terms of having superhighways and skyscrapers, big institutions, banks, large GDPs, etc. It's also across the continent some of the most beautiful beaches. And at times I tell people it can simply be termed as paradise in heaven. Now, these are the images that we don't usually see. But then there's the other side of Africa. The side that is filled with sadness and grief. And I will talk about that side of Africa, but also about the possibility that we can change it. That we can change and we can end the fact that millions of people are living in extreme poverty, poor slum communities, where they don't want to be, where their families don't want to be. But because of extreme poverty, this is their only hope. Of children who don't have access to health care. In many countries that I visited, something as simple as $40 cannot be afforded to send children. And most of all, the millions of mothers across the continent who sometimes for wars that they had nothing to do with will sit and watch their children die from starvation and from hunger. This is something that I've experienced as I stand before you. I could have been one of those children who simply had become a statistic. My mother and I lived in Liberia when the war started. And I remember when the war began and we were forced out of our homes, forced into a refugee center. And there was a point where we had not eaten for a long time. There was simply no food. We didn't have access to safe drinking water. I was 9 years old, started drifting in and out of consciousness, on the floor, in a room with about 16 other families. And there was a point in that room where I'd gotten so sick, I stopped moving, and people in the room thought I had died, and someone who was not a medical doctor came out and felt my pulse, and this person essentially said that I had died. And right there, they wrapped me up in the cloth that we were laying on, and took my body out and threw it in a heap of bodies and left me for dead. I was 9 years old. It was my mother who, believing that I had not died, ran out of the room. And she started to go from heap to heap and pile to pile until she found me. And all I remember is just feeling this violent shaking on my body and waking up and seeing my mom's face. And that was when I made the vow. I didn't know how. But I said that if it takes the entire life, or my entire life, I would spend it making sure that no child went through what I went through. I love this quote. This has been one of the things that has driven me. The idea that we need to stop bitching and start a revolution. This year, but we can multiply it. In all of the countries I've seen, when I look into the eyes of young people, I see so much hope. I see so much potential. I see the possibility of change. This was a ride that I took from Freetown to Liberia. It was a 10-hour ride in public transportation. I mean, there were 4 people in the front, 5 people back there with me, 5 people behind. The 4 guys up front or on top of the car, they're not just sitting there because the car is not in motion. They were up there for the entire 8-hour ride, okay? And this guy who's up front, on top of the car, cracked jokes the entire time. Jay Leno has nothing on the young man. But why I tell you this is because there is so much hope. People in that car was not talking about their deep suffering. They were talking about the possibility of a better tomorrow. This is one of my favorite photos from some of the work we're doing. It was taken in Uganda. When I first went to Uganda, I met a family. They had 6 children, and the only way they could feed their families was to send these kids out to beg for food. We gave them a small microloan, a small amount of money to start a business. And they started this business, and within a few months, when I went back, I was being greeted on the airport by a daughter, one of the daughters. They had started a flower business that had grown tremendously to over $3,000 in a short time frame. That now this family no longer had to send their children to beg. They could now afford to pay for tuition and send their children to the hospital. Agricultural programs for young people in East Africa, where they're able to grow food and they're able to feed their families and sustain themselves. Computer programs for young people in Liberia. There was a recent survey of teachers, and 99% of teachers in Liberia had not even touched a computer. And we started free computer training programs to make sure that young people across the continent have access to those skills. Teacher training in mass levels so that teachers who have gone through so much war and so much trauma, when they get into the classrooms, have the basic skills to reach their children. And the young women who during these wars are exploited, who many times have no options whatsoever but to turn to prostitution in order to feed themselves. But when given the smallest opportunity through some of our centers for women, are able to take the skills we gave them and they're able to produce and manufacture goods that can then be sold on a bigger market and they can fend for themselves. This is a diamond mine. It has been mined out in Sierra Leone. Thousands of people were killed in the Sierra Leone Civil War because of diamonds. And this is what it looks like when that land has been done with and discarded. Nobody wants to use it. And when we got to Sierra Leone, we started to work on training the former child soldiers in agriculture, and we went to the communities. And we said to them, you're not using this land, grant it to us. And working with these former child soldiers, the youngest being 6 years old, who had been forced to fight and kill, were able to transform this once useless land into agricultural plots, which they could now grow food. It was a revitalization. The revolution must begin. It is a revolution that will be led by people. The possibility of ending world poverty, of ending extreme human suffering is here and it's with us. But it's not about governments, it's not about the UN, it's about each person believing that I can do something, that you can do something to save and change a real life. Of course, no speech is complete without some self-advertisement. But the main reason I show this is because I like the title of this magazine. The power of humanity. The power of our humanity to reach out to the rest of humanity. I believe that we must not only challenge ourselves to create personal wealth, but we must also challenge ourselves and our communities to invest in the development of all of humanity. This must be our burning desire. And the secret between, or the difference between simple material happiness and being totally in touch and fulfilled and happy within our very soul. There was a recent survey that was done by the World Bank and the IMF, and they showed that the happiest people in the world are in Africa. It would be mind-boggling for most people because you think about a continent that has the highest degree of poverty. But one of the things they also found was that across African communities, there's such a large, huge degree of giving that it was rewarding to people. It made them happier. And this is one challenge I leave with you. The challenge that I want to give you, even as you are in this organization, this business that has this amazing model. And by the way, I told Sprite the other day, I said, or last night after I came to your dinner, I was the guy walking around in a t-shirt. I know I looked illegal and people were like, who's that? But after being at that dinner, I said to Sprite, listen, WorldVentures will become the organization. I'm going to get into this. And I'm going to get into it big time. And I'm going to make sure that the business I create with WorldVentures will be one that can sustain and fund the organization. So we're not even just waiting for donations. We're going to even across Africa, is that people don't just want to sit back and wait for handouts. They're getting out there, they're doing something. We see ingenuity happening across the continent. In Sierra Leone, I met this guy. He had never been to school, did not have any formal training. From scraps, he had developed this rice cooker. And you could call this rice cooker from a cell phone. It would start cooking, and when the rice was done, it would send a text message back saying rice is cooked. People are working. Africans are working. And to you and to WorldVentures, I say this is a market. It's a market potential to invest in. There are 1 billion people on the continent, a lot of resilience, a growing GDP, low inflation, and endless potential. We can change this. We no longer have to see these images of starving children and mothers who are crying for their babies. We can transform that to the images of children who are well-fed, well-educated, and well-cared for. It will be a partnership between your community and people who are working around the world to change the world using simple techniques. And I leave you with this quote. Those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. Very simple. Very simple. Thank you. And I'm going to say to you in all of your businesses, those people who say you cannot be successful, just tell them, don't interrupt me, and I say to you that we will change the world together. Thank you very much.
Please welcome to the stage, International Marketing Director, National Trainer and Packaging Member, Matt Morris.
We're doing volunteers, aren't we? So we've got some volunteers coming up, and we're talking about doing some with Kimmie. And we want to introduce you to 2 young ladies who went on a volunteer with Kimmie to Liberia. And these 2 young ladies are from Michael Brown's organization here. Michael Brown, NBA player, 11 years, former assistant coach to the Chicago Bulls, lives here in Vegas. similarities between gang violence and genocide, and works with children in the correctional facilities being tried as adults here in Las Vegas to empower them, mentor them, turn their lives around, give them an opportunity and a sense of hope. And so these two young ladies actually got to experience working with former child soldiers in Liberia. And will you just say a couple words about what that meant to you?
It was like a life-changing experience. I realized how powerful and how grateful I should be for my life. I experienced a different way to live. I noticed that we are grateful just to have light. They don't have light after dark. So for them to be alive and be strong, and they're one of the happiest people I've ever met in my life. I mean, joyful. They praised us like we were God. Just to come and see them, it was amazing.
What did that mean to you when you came back here to the United States?
I changed my whole life around. When I met Mike and Esther, I was involved in gangs. I went through a whole bunch of stuff I shouldn't have. I now am on the right track. I have my driver's license. I'm in cosmetology school. I just take my life with granted every day.
So if anybody's interested in being able to participate on a volunteer trip like this, with kids like this, and help us get kids like this who want to go and have a life-changing experience. This is one of the new programs that we'll be creating in the next couple of months. Again, you can come back and talk to me at the Manifest Foundation booth. And again, can we please give another incredible round of applause for this amazing gentleman who speaks all over the world, and President King